family tree girl, right? And so she's the Descendant Project Researcher at the University of Virginia, where she spearheads the study of the enslaved laborers who laid the university's foundational stones. Her background spans with nonprofit and local government, and her work is focused primarily on real estate, affordable housing, and fair housing discrimination issues. So she is an avid genealogist over the last 30 years and was born and raised in Michigan. Okay. So she conducts genealogy workshops at local, state, and national conferences. And she has this inspiring interactive called So What, with genealogy research, along with interesting problem solving methodology lectures, such as the use of timelines. So we're going to touch on a little bit of that today, along with other techniques that would help us in our search to get past that proverbial wall of 1870 when it comes to researching, our African American ancestry. So, Dr. Murphy, I'm not going to take a whole lot more time with introductions. So, I want to go ahead and give you the floor and have you present to us today around these techniques called the Murphy Rule.
It sounds good. And thank you for having me tonight. And I'm going to go right into it and appreciate everybody coming. A lot of folks that I know that are here know about this Murphy's Rule. So I am going to proceed in there. And I'm also going to say that just hold on. I will give as many examples as I can. This is going to be a little bit different probably than some talks you've attended because I'm actually going to walk through these rules, each of them. And so I'm happy to share Murphy's Rule, Foundations for Genealogical Success, and it will be based on strategies and methods. So an overview, going to talk about Murphy's Rule, going to focus on fundamental resources and things that could probably help you through them brick walls. I'm going to challenge George a little bit later in another setting about that 1870 brick wall, because there's hundreds of us that dispute that brick wall, and you'll see examples of that today, actually. And so we're going to use some examples, and every one of the rules, you'll see examples on things to tap in. Just think about this as the basics. That's all I could say from right now. And I'm actually going to shrink down the side, and we're going to take Q&A at the end. So I am going to close that so I can see my screen. Everybody ready? And again, thank you all for coming. So genealogy is about time, location, and asking questions. And if you think about that, you're probably already doing this. And this talk today is basically, it doesn't matter if you're brand new or if you've been doing this 5 years or 10 years. It's just a different way of thinking about it. So Murphy's Rule is actually follow the money, the land, the water, the community, and the faith of the people. It is a framework for you to follow. It is a platform. It will hit multiple facets or times during an ancestor's life. It also can direct you to records and some that you might not normally look at. And again, it's simply the basics. But a lot of us were not taught these basics. We got a hit and a miss. We know the first thing we go for as genealogists or family historians or whoever, and we're researching ancestry, we're going to hit the census first. This is just a little bit different way of looking at this. And again, this will address free or enslaved folks. It's not just geared towards people that were enslaved or during slave era or just free. This will work for everybody. So George mentioned, so what? Let me tell you what so what is. And I teach this session at Maggie, which is the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. And I know Renata's here. She's another instructor at this institute. Number one, it is the only institute focused on African ancestry. And so in the track that we teach in, which is methods and strategies, one of the sessions is called So What? And it's an analysis. So look at the little chart on the left. And that is, and of course, I'm just saying Murphy, so what? Because people will remember something simple like so what? And so what I'm basically looking at here is saying, I know this information wherever I acquired it from. It could be a document, it could be oral history, it could be out of a book and so forth. But you know what? I'm questioning this. So the strategy here is what you question, what do you do next? So I'm looking at documents and things and I'm saying, well, so what? I know my grandparents. So what? I know so-and-so died. So, this, that, and other. But maybe there's missing information on a document. So you're questioning, well, who would know that? And then what's your next steps? On the right-hand side is a timeline. And these are things I use at Maggie. But this is a timeline. And a lot of you know I'm a big component of timeline because it keeps you organized. Yes, people can say, oh, but I've got a tree on Ancestry. I've got a tree on Family Search. It's already in a timeline. But I guarantee you what's on Ancestry and what's on Family Search is not going to have most of the local history, and it's not going to have any of your oral history. That's going to come from you and your family and who you're reaching out to. So the purpose of a timeline is that it's going to be a document that you're going to place information in chronological order. You're going to question it. You can use the chart or just talk, with you in that document. You're going to put the resource in there. You're going to put whatever the event is. Could be birth, death, buying and selling, being enslaved, being free, whatever it is. And of course, the reference and the citation is very critical because if you hand this off to anybody in your family or a genealogy buddy, you want them to be able to get to the same information you're looking at. You also want to clock whoever the informant is or the witnesses involved. And you're going to, so what? Well, who are these people? I don't know who these people are. So I'm questioning information. And then you've got the notes and questions. So what you want to do there is say, I'm questioning this, just like the chart, or this doesn't make sense. Or maybe you got different ages within a census record or whatever it is. And then what's your next step? That's what you're going to do next. You're going to say, I need to clarify or I need to resolve this. How am I going to do it? And start numbering your steps that you will go for. And then tell yourself you did a good job and you completed it. So again, I'm framing everything to be able to use Murphy's rules. So first rule was follow the money. You're also going to see these cutesy, fabulous AI generated icons on the right. So I've been playing with them and they're kind of exciting and kind of pretty. So just follow along and stuff. And if there's any questions about that, I'll tell you how I generated them and everything. So follow the money is the first Murphy rule. So where's the money? Where is money listed? You got to know the law. You got to look at wills, tax records, merchant records, anywhere the ancestor could be spending money or they're part of the money transaction. Could be debts or possessions. An example could be a will where an ancestor saying, you know what, I'm passing these folks off to my heirs or these items off to my heirs. So you're getting identifying information, you're following where the money is going, or maybe it's their estate and they're paying off the debts. Who are they paying the debts to? So you want to follow the money to find out where your folks are at and around or in the same community. And these are the things that are going on. So types of records we would look at could be wills, probate records, tax lists, could be business ledgers. Look at city directories or receipts. So if you'll see, I've covered pretty much anybody that could be white, free, or enslaved during whatever time. So again, it is a strategy to find out where that money's clicking and where are your people fitting in. Another example could be a will that's detailing the estate distribution. In other words, their settlement. So you could find who's buying things, who they owe money to, and in the case during slave era time, where people are being either gifted or rented out, so the estate can continue paying on the debt, but you can also pick up family relations. So again, following the money. Here's some money example documents. On the left is the tax list. You're going to get a name. You're going to get who's paying and how much. And also you could get who else is in that community. In the middle, it says list of servants and values. This is a document, a list of servants from the Tooley estate from Clark County, Virginia. And I just highlighted because that was where me and another researcher, Antonio Austin, are researching some of the enslaved folks up at Clark County, Virginia. And then again, on the right is a form. Some people like using forms. That's from Family Tree Magazine. You could tear it out. It's a tax record worksheet. So you're following the money. So maybe your ancestor was either the plantation owner or your ancestor could have been property on that plantation or that farm, whatever it is during whatever time it's called. So you can track any of the money transactions. Is there federal? Is there local? Is there state? And see if you can gather and who's around your people. So that form, people can use it. I like forms. I use them all the time. As you can see, the so what and the timeline comes into play, but it also keeps me organized. So here's an example of a Virginia estate settlement example. So you see the date, you're seeing who's getting paid or money that came in going out. But also just to note, it's also showing not only the settlement, but it's also showing where property enslaved continued to get hired out and to who and how much money was coming in. This is critical during slave era research. Hopefully, the enslaver has passed prior to freedom or, say, the end of the Civil War, so their estates would have to be settled. So there's clues and indication. So for me as the researcher in doing work for UVA, most of you know I'm trying to find descendants of these enslaved labor. Well, here's Fleming, here's Ned, which could also be Edward, and here's Watts, and here's Asuki, and it's telling me who they got rented to. This is an estate settlement. That meant somebody died. And this is now all getting settled, which I note over here it's an Albemarle County estate settlement of Joseph Brand Jr. And again, I'm also following that money. Next rule is follow the land. You got to still know the law. That is critical. Whatever time frame and wherever you're looking at, you need to know what laws are in place. You're going to look for land grants, deeds, and again, property tax money. So it's also, or tax records. So you're also linking back to following the money. But you're tracing family movement or any inheritance patterns. Example, a land deed that shows the ownership of property, but also they're adjacent to someone else. Got to have a map. Got to look at a map. Where are the people and who's around your people? And also, anytime you're looking at a community, also think there could be connections, either by marriage or business dealings. So you want to analyze the document on the land, finding out who the heirs and what are the relationships. A lot of times your wills or the deed will say husband of or owner of, wife of. And then you want to always know any other possessions that it might be listed that comes with the land. And I say that because I found a document for an ancestor that purchased 400 acres or owned 400 acres in Louisa County. And he's up in Jefferson County, West Virginia, but he's purchasing 400 acres in Louisa County. And included in that property was four enslaved people, but it didn't name them. It just included the point. And I worked for years trying to find out who purchased the land, and was not able to track that property or even find out its existence. I'm not done with it yet. But again, coming back to another research tip is to cross-reference the land records with the tax records and inventories. Here's an example. And again, using also the so what, questioning the information. Well, some of this, what we'll talk about later, I'm showing on the right-hand side is an Ohio migrations map and information that I got from RootsWeb. And this is for a reason why. And I'm pointing to a Medina, Wayne County, Ohio, and I'm also looking at Morrill County, Ohio. So just remember those and put on the side because you can see the routes going into Ohio. So again, something happened in Ohio while I'm looking here and why I'm presenting it to you. So when you're looking at property, a great example is the website Faded Contours, and they're actually mapped in the owners and property on the map. That's local, folks are using that. So you want to see who's in that community again, and that will tie to the community later. Looking for migration patterns, and you're basing that on land transactions also. So again, research tips, find ancestral lands, maps that's out there, cross-reference them back with the tax records. And again, you're back following money again when you're dealing with land. Did your ancestors own land? Were they sharecroppers? Were they buying and selling land? Are they part of a transaction or were they witnesses? So they're somewhere around. And again, I stopped looking at surnames when I actually probably about good 5 or 6 years ago. And the reason I stopped focusing so much on surnames, and especially when I was dealing with the enslaved era, is because those things change. First names could change as well, but definitely the surnames. So now I start looking at the community who was around the people that I'm researching and then try to build the surnames from there. I will make a comment about the research I do for UVA. Probably 96% of them is first name onlys. And so it is definitely all through slave era. And all of these folks were rented to UVA as laborers to build that institution. So again, you can see how my research had to change to adapt to who I was looking at during what time, what laws are in place. So here's an example on the land. Newspapers and etc. Okay, on the left, got a newspaper and it's about land. There's a sale Saturday, March 13th. It's 1840, and it's Luke Goins up in Loudoun County. The sale of 150 acres of land, and it was formerly his. He passed away. Another clue of finding some land records. So not everything could be presented at either a historical society. You're going to have to look for courthouses and look for papers at the historical society that could be in manuscripts or family donations and things to find, land transactions that might have got lost or something, or you not finding them at the courthouse. And a lot of times things could be just at the house repositories. And I'll let somebody ask me that question about the house repositories in the chat. The other map that's on the right-hand side to following the land is actually the Benjamin Borden map. Some folks might be familiar with this. This is around Augusta County in Rockbridge County, Virginia. And what it is, that's the list of the first 100 settlers in the county. and it's got their names on the map. Benjamin Borden Jr. took over for his father, and so forth. Again, I'm going into the community. So if I'm researching this county or the other county that's adjacent to it, I can tap into those early settlers at this time. And this is very early, but again, are there generations of descendants also there? Another way to look following the land. So now following the water. This is a little bit more challenging. But again, when I think about the water, I think of migrations. Remember the Ohio group up there, the Ohio map. I think about people traveling or migrating or moving. It's any rivers, lakes, or anything close to it that would make sense that if people are migrating, they're going to have to be close to water, because they've got to, if they're moving, think about it, somebody, a bunch of folks, a family in a wagon, and they're traveling. They're going from one state to another or one county to another. Is there any place that water is around? Because there's movement on water. Census data could also show members that are mariners or fishermen, which might also know that there must be water not too far from them. And then you could research more for migration patterns because people lived around water. There's settlements around water. Types of records we could look relating to water could be port records, ship manifests, occupational listings. An example, maybe you've got an ancestor that was a sailor and they moved and they were traveling by the water into different areas within the state you're in or during war or whatever have you. The example here, History of Shenandoah Springs, here at the bottom, was a place where an ancestor of mine was a boatman and he transferred people. He dies in 1874, so I'll clock back to why it was important. But he was moving people from one side of the water to the other. And there's connections with Underground Railroad with these boatmen and so forth. This again is up in Jefferson County, West Virginia. But remember, anything in West Virginia was Virginia prior to June 20th, 1863. So the transition happened during the war. So following the water examples, again, look to the right, Richmond Slave Trail. It's on the water. You can see it. And again, I haven't had the pleasure to take this, but what excited me about this, it said it's a walking trail that chronicles the history, and it's written there, and I don't know if y'all can see it that well, of the trade of the enslaved Africans from Africa to Virginia until 1775, and then away from Virginia, especially Richmond, to other locations throughout America. So during slave era, if you're going during domestic slave trade or transatlantic, whichever way you're looking, you're going to have to follow the water. So what's on the left-hand side is the website from Dr. Jenny Williams, Kinfolkology. And also it was on Slave Voyages of Oceans of Kinfolk, which was one of the sets. So looking at slave ship manifest, where people are coming from, where they're taking people, and so forth. And again, slave era research is very detailed if you're looking to find folks that are being part of the slave trade. You're going to get their name. A lot of them will have surnames. You're going to get a description of them. You're going to get where they docked in, where they leave, where they came from, who's the ship captain, the ship name, and who's buying them. So again, another reason to look at water examples and think about the maps and finding out when any county you're looking at, find out where the water is at. Typically I go into a county and I'm looking for the courthouse, I'm looking for the churches, I'm looking for cemeteries, and I'm looking for schools, and I'm looking for water. to find out if anybody's coming in or out or what's going on. So here's the census. And I mentioned earlier about looking at people's occupations. So on the left, you got 1870, Virginia, Gloucester County, and Robert Kemp. And you can see that he is an oysterman, number one. That tells me water's not too far from them. On the right is actually a 1950 census, and it's going to tell me these lodgers, and I don't know who's drawing, but I see it's some drawing on the screen. But anyway, it will show who's either Navy, fishermen, and so forth. And again, you're looking at the community. But what you're getting is on a census, even though they have inaccuracies, and it doesn't matter when, but you're looking at people and the community and where they're working. So you're looking for fishermen, you're looking for Navy people that might have served, and so forth. So again, utilize another look at the census by paying attention to occupations. So the next rule is follow the community. That is the big one. Research neighbors, shared community events, any group migration records you might have seen that could identify your people during certain times. An example is the census or a city directory. It's going to show the neighbors. It's going to show people that have the same surname, suggesting there could be some connections in that same neighborhood that you're looking at. So community connections, neighbors and associates. If you haven't heard of the fan club, that is friends, associates, and neighbors. It was developed by Elizabeth Shown Mills, and she says this is a good way of conducting some good research, is looking at your folks' fan club, who is around them. The types of records, again, census, city directories, local newspapers, and again, census is the first go-to we're going to look at, but there's so much more, and you'll see a few more examples in a moment. So up in the right-hand corner, these are going to be examples of community type records or documents. So you're looking for patterns in names and occupations. You're looking for, again, as I noted, events and things. So in the area that we're living in Central Virginia, we're looking at what were the notables doing, what historical events. We know in Central Virginia, we've got Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe. What were they doing? Who were they doing business with in their community? For the UVA project that I do, Jefferson is the center of Albemarle County. There is 8 counties that touch Albemarle County. That is my research area. It is the only county in the Commonwealth that has 8 additional 8 counties that touch it. So again, that gives me a foundation of a map per se of where I'm looking for descendants of these enslaved neighbors. So another tip here could be to investigate community institutions like your schools or your churches and things. Okay, up in the right-hand corner, we are looking at a 1779 tax list. Well, you know what? They noted a Negro that was on there. And this man's name is Alexander Wilson, and they have Negro, not colored or anything. It says Negro. So again, I've got a community document because you know what? Some of those people might be neighbors. There's another Wilson there. So it gives me more to look for and find out if these people on each of these columns, because it's in alphabetical order, are they around? At least I know they're in the same county. And again, that's a tax list for Antrim in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. So now look down on the right, Sevillepedia.org, 1900. I did a Google and I said, what was going on in say Charlottesville, Albemarle County. And so this popped up and it showed, and I asked for 1900 specifically, and it shows me the elections. There's again events that are happening in the community where you are conducting research. So it's given me a little timeline. July 11th, 1900. Gleason, his name is James Gleason, was elected as a councilman from the third ward, so on and so forth. There's another General Assembly, March 3rd, a new charter for the city of Charlottesville. And again, look at the area that your research, do a simple Google and find out, ask it a question. So again, just an example of what happened in 1900. Now, if I look over on the left, right, it says the flood of 1870. Now, y'all, I have been here for almost, I think I've been here over 20 years. I have. I've been here 21 years. I never knew there was a flood of 1870. I hope y'all did. And again, I did not know. And you know, Tom Chapman, I hope y'all know about this flood of 1870 on Sevillepedia. I had no idea. In the fall of 1870, there was a big flood, Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland. And it was September 28th through the 30th, and it was called the Great Virginia Flood of 1870. And it hit Charlottesville through the Shenandoah Valley and so forth. I had no idea because you know what? Records could have been destroyed, people could have been displaced, dispersed. So if we lose people around 1870 or right around there and we can't find them, especially in this area, who this affected all the way to the Shenandoah Valley, this could be why. So again, looking at community events and documents, just another way of looking at it. And so think about, maybe I'm not finding people in 1870. What happened? Did anything happen? So another rule would be follow the community. Here's another example. The Bureau. This is my favorite. You can see the little icon up in the right. My favorite is, and again, I'm looking at community, the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And I love that I spelled freedmen wrong. So if nobody catches it, I just told you that I spelled it wrong. But anyway, also called the Bureau. So the Freedmen's Bureau comes around March 3rd, 1865, at the end of the Civil War. We know their pre-burial records. Why would I sit this under the rules? Because I'm looking at communities. There was field offices set up in communities where people could come and get relief. So there's benefits to us as researchers. You got the act showing on the left, and the period would be 1865 to 1872. So the column on the left, where it says marriages and so forth, that's the types of records that's in the Bureau. And let me say this for those of you that are not researching the Bureau, there's 3.4 million records in there. And I'll tell you a little bit how to get to them and things. But look at the list on the left. Those are the types of records that are in there, in the Bureau. You look at the list on the right, and I know we got some Freedmen Friday folks here. So you have seen this and y'all know this like the back of your hands. So I'm hoping there's folks that have not been exposed to the Freedmen's Bureau to think about the stuff that's on the right. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for this, and you know what? We're still looking at the community or the county or where that field office is at, possibly that could have our folks in there. Look at the list: ages, race, occupations, birth dates, marriages, former marriages and their children, former slave owners. These are the types of things in the records that are prior to 1870 federal population census. And that one, George, is for you. Just to know, 3.4 million. This is just one collection. And then I'll ask the audience, and you can put in the chat room or when we get to the Q&A, do you know who's even in the Bureau? Then I go to the next. Here's some sample records from the Bureau. On the left is a labor contract. So you're going to always think about, what am I going to do with the labor contract? Well, number one, it's going to give you a date. It's going to give you a location. It is going to give you the two parties involved, what the person that's being hired is doing, how long they're going to be doing it, and how much money they're going to get paid, and if quarters and food and that type thing is included. And then you're going to have witnesses. You're going to have who's being hired. Some of the labor contracts will identify the role of the person. This is an example of David Brown. It says former slave of George H. Crank. Well, the party that's hiring him is George H. Crank, Albemarle County. That just told you David Brown's former owner. Most of the labor contracts that I come across, they are being the person being hired is actually being hired by their former enslaver. So you're going to look for those key factors stated on a labor contract, the dates, the location, who's hiring, who's being hired, and then start working back at the community. So every one of the rules is going to take you back through another rule or connect with it. So that's just an example of a labor contract. In the middle is actually a Louisa County marriage record. The Commonwealth of Virginia said, Negroes, you are able to be married effective February 27th, 1866. So a lot of records, not just Virginia, this is throughout, the South where these field offices are set up. You will have people come into the field office at whatever time. You got to know the law. I'm talking Virginia here, 1866, and basically say, we're a couple, we cohabitated. This is my age, this is my name, and you know what? These are our children. So here is just an example of one of the folks I was researching for the UVA project, and it was Nelson Price, and he's on line 472. He's 48 years old, and his wife, America, is 46. He's a laborer in there in Louisa County. But you know what? He was rented to UVA, and his former enslaver was Egbert Watson in Albemarle County. So again, another connection. Look to the right. Part of the Freedmen's Bureau also, people could file complaints. This is just an example of the complaint that was filed, and it's given a date, it's given the two parties, and it could also give more information or if it was resolved or referred to the local court. So again, I'm just naming a couple examples. You saw the list. Definitely a place not to ignore researching. So now let's talk about follow the faith of the people. This is another critical step for people to do. You could look for church records, registries, religious affiliation. Were there any events in the community that you're researching? Were there important life events? It could be the birth of somebody. It could be the death of somebody. An example could be a baptism record that might identify godparents or sponsors that could be related or could be part of the fan club. Faith-based records, churches did keep detailed records of the people that attended. I had a record I tried to include in here, which was up in Loudoun County. And I don't know if they're my ancestors or not, but it was two people that were enslaved by a gentleman named John Rose. That church up there had attendance records, and the slaves were listed as having as a requirement to attend. And I couldn't find it. I don't know what I called it, but I'll show you another record just to give you an indication of looking at the church records. Renata just recently did a fabulous presentation, and she could probably throw it in the chat if that's available public for people to see. And it was about churches in the importance of using those records to be able to track your family. Number one, their movement, but the faith of the people also is critical because if people are migrating or moving, they're going to move because of family, jobs, or their faith, religion, groups, and things like that, or something about looking at land able to find and things like that. So it's really critical not to ignore the local aspects of the faith of the people. Baptism records, marriage registers, or even the burial records, all of that gets looped in. And again, you want to pay attention to who else is around and who's listed. So, some more on following the faith of the people is that it didn't change. There it is. So here's an example that I pulled, which was very significant in my own personal research, and that was that I looked for a record from oral history, and that we were told that the family donated acreage to a church. Well, it ended up that Joseph B. Davis donated a half acre to the church of the reorganized Church of the Latter-day Saints. This is actually up in Benzie, Michigan. But what was critical once I received this and found the document that showed the transfer of the land, and I found out, well, what was the reorganized Church of the Latter-day Saints? I had to go learn about them because Joseph is a man of color and he's in, and again, looking at this time, he's born about 1839, as you can see on the record. I only had estimates. I wasn't sure exactly what county he was born in. This church record gave me the actual town or the county he was born in. And of course, I knew everything, from his life and when he died, his children and everything, but I didn't know where in Pennsylvania. So this church record was able to provide that to me. Plus, I learned about the reorganized Church of the Latter-day Saints. And again, this was up in Joyfield Township in Benzie County, Michigan. So some research tips about looking at the following the faith of the people. You're going to look at denominational archives. Don't forget the benevolent groups, and the familysearch.org wiki is a great place to go look because it will list things that you can use. You can ask or look at the wiki for all kind of thing, where documents are at, what Family Search has online, and so forth. But you got to understand that churches were very prominent. When new communities were being established, first thing they're building is a church. So think about the time frame that you're looking. Even during the Civil War and after the Civil War, places of worship was critical for people of color as well as everybody else. So let's do an example real quick as I wind this down, applying Murphy's rule. Some of you are familiar with some of this, so I'm going to just attach it to the records. So the goal was for me to find out parents and siblings of William Davis and Mildred Brand, his wife, was to find out information about the second great grandparents. And were they free or were they enslaved? And why did they go to Pennsylvania? I know them in Michigan. As you can see, once I set a goal for research, then I start clocking down what I know. What do I know? Okay, I got census records on them. Mildred was born somewhere in Virginia between 1818 and 1825. That's a big gap. But the different censuses gave me different ranges for her birth. I know she got married to William Davis, who was supposedly born 1818 in Pennsylvania. I did find them in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. And remember that Joseph Davis on the church record gave me that location of Franklin County. That's when I was able, from the church record, go and find them in 1850. census. Two of their children were born in Ohio. That came from census. I know they were homesteaders in Benzie County, and I know I had the Davis story as oral history. That's what I know. So, again, none of this is any so called order, but I'm just going to say this is how I start gathering information. So I'm going to use reverse genealogy instead of looking at looking for the person who is dead. I'm going with the living and going to work my way backward, do the exact opposite. But one of the things we do is go back and forth. Sometimes I'm looking at the living for clues to go back, and sometimes I'm looking at people that have passed or in other documents in the past and then trying to connect to the future. So again, I'm following the money. I'm looking at the census to find out if they were owners, which ones would show that they owned property or had real estate. Yes, 1850 census, you see at the top, $1,000. Okay, that told me that William Davis, mulatto, showing there, that he owned property. Oh, where did he get the 11 acres from? 1860, I find him and a wife, which also is in the 1850, and they're in Medina County, Ohio. Remember the migration map. Medina County, Morrow County. 1870, I find them in Benzie County, Michigan. I also note that in Pennsylvania, they're in the census. I also know I got to find out about buying and selling land because these people, I got them Pennsylvania, I got them Ohio, and I also have them in Michigan. Remember the tax list of 18, there's a tax list I found William Davis, and that was the first document to find him, and that was in 1843, and it says colored on it. So William Davis, 11 acres, colored, paid taxes on that in 1843. So again, I'm walking through following the money. And again, they're noted in the 1850 in the 1860 census. That should tell you something. And I even have it on the screen. But think about, we got people of color that's located in the census before 1870 federal population. So now I'm following this land. Where did these people get 11 acres? Well, they acquired the 11 acres. Actually, the wife did before she got married. No, she got the land while she was married. It was for her and her children. They sell that land. So I was able to follow that land from them acquiring it and then selling it. And they leave, which you're seeing Medina County, Ohio, which links back to the migration map. They actually came into Ohio in Wayne County, purchased 25 acres with some of the money from selling 11 acres in Pennsylvania. So again, the migration routes. Now we're talking money. We got land ownership. So they come into one county and then they're buying acreage. And again, they're buying this property, 25 acres, like 1859. We're on the brink of the Civil War. We got people of color. Doesn't matter where they're at, right? They also sold that 25 acres in Medina County, Ohio in 1862. So what happened? Well, the Homestead Act of 1862 is opened up in Michigan Territory. It's opening up. So the Homestead Act is going to say, hey, we're going to give you 160 acres. Come do these things, work on it for 5 years and so forth. So they sell the 25 acres. They are selling it. You can see the deed on the bottom where they're selling the acreage. And then they're heading up to Michigan, and you'll see the land patent from the homestead of the 1862 Act, and it's for 160 acres. So again, I am following the land, the money, and the people that are involved. But what I didn't mention, which I have on a bullet here, while they were traveling and so forth, the person they sold that land to, that 11 acres, was Reverend Curtsey with the United Brethren Church back in Pennsylvania. Well, he didn't pay all the money. So somebody helped William Davis and his wife file a court case to get the rest of their money. So another thing about money and land, because in that court case that I found, it also identified there was another child and that their firstborn, that one in the church record, remember being born in Franklin County, was the illegitimate child. That was the wife's child, not William and Mildred couple's child. And that was Joseph Davis. And again, I learned of another child. So look at the information that is coming from following the land. So, another questions and things coming. Oh, I went right back. So, again, we saw maps. Now I know to follow the church, the community, and the faith of the people. I know what was going on in Pennsylvania because that land is where the new minister comes in and is buying those 11 acres, which is right by the United Brethren Church. So, again, I reached out in Michigan, but I also tapped into sources in Pennsylvania. So again, I'm looking for the migration routes. I'm looking at the faith of the people. When I talk about Michigan, these people of color are going to the Church of the Reorganized Church of the Latter-day Saints. Well, number one, they were allowed to attend, and women were allowed to hold positions and things. There's a difference from the reorganized and then the Latter-day Saints. There was a split in the church just like the rest of the churches. So another thing is looking at that picture of 1911. That is in the township where the Davises were at in Michigan. That's a gathering of Joyfield Township. And I found that through a bulletin and things connecting with other churches, but that wasn't a community event. My folks are in that picture, the Davis family, and also Marsh family because they married in with the Davises. Again, I'm finding where my people were at. They get there, put in an application for homestead in 1863. They give 5 acres. That's another document that was located. They sell 5 acres to the township for the cemetery where all of the people or family are buried in. And then the son, Joseph, that you saw, he donates that half an acre for the Reorganized Church of the Latter-day Saints. Again, the paperwork and the connections. So a summary of the key points of Murphy's rule is that each of those rules should give you some unique insight to what money was going around, what property, any community involvement that could help you break down some walls or gather more information. Number 2, researching around that community, the faith groups, the local economy, again, could directly connect you to either a record, an event, or people. Murphy's rule also will complement your traditional stuff that you're doing, especially in African American genealogy, where you might be limited to documentation and you turn to oral history and things that are going on and looking more at the community. Number 4, brick walls get dissolved because we're looking beyond just the person. You are looking at the community and everything that's happening there, where actually the records are created locally. They're not online. They didn't get online. They didn't get created in Salt Lake City or Ancestry or whatever. They got created at your local level. So one takeaway for you is to make sure you exhaust your local level resources, historical societies, public libraries, be involved with the descendant groups like you are with Mount Pelier, could be descendants of enslaved communities or whatever, GU 272 and things like that. So I just want to summarize that. And then last words here. There's no magic when doing genealogical research. None whatsoever. It's the basics. So I thank you and open to take any questions. Here's contact information for the projects that I work on for UVA, Descendants of Enslaved Communities, which is just like the Mount Pelier Descendants Committee. I have a Facebook page, Finding Enslaved Laborers at UVA. I shared the counties that I'm researching for descendants of enslaved. And I also mentioned about Maggie, the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, that's coming up in July. And also the International African American Museum and the things that is available on their website and so forth. So I thank you and hope that you walk away with some things. And I am going to give it back to George and stop sharing my screen.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. That was really informing, actually. So I think we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
All right. So what is the best resource for the Freedmen Bureau files?
Ooh, how many do you want me to list? You can get the Freedmen Bureau records on Ancestry, Family Search, or Archives, National Archives. And one of the things, you can always come hang out with us on Freedmen Bureau Fridays at Friday at 7 o'clock. And we go through some of those basics. It's open to anyone, you know, and things, and we share. Karen Kay put information in there. Actually, that she just put the registration in there, so people can register to attend. And again, it's open. We look at records, we share information. When I leave, they're talking DNA. So again, whatever you're looking at, but it's really about helping everybody. I'm looking for descendants of enslaved in those counties, but we don't just look at Virginia. Just know that. We're looking at other states and throughout the Bureau. We typically will start off with Virginia and then go tap into other states. Because one of the things about the Freedmen's Bureau is people could come in there and request transportation assistance. I can say my children and my husband were sold to Mississippi. So now you got the Bureau in say Virginia contacting a field office in Mississippi and trying to make that reconnect and provide transportation. So that's even another record I didn't even talk about, you know, that's there and available. So again, those are places to look at. Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau is another one. Go and you're seeing an actual map of where the field offices are located. The Black Pearls of Genealogy have another source, and those type things, you know, you can find, you can Google and get them, or we can put them in the chat. And the Black Pearls of Genealogy, you're going to have, just like the Mapping the Freedmen site, you're going to have the descriptive pamphlet that tells you what's in that field office and who's in charge there. And then also you could find other states' records within the state that you're looking in. So again, Virginia field offices are all indexed. So thank you to the volunteers that did that. They're the only state right now that the field offices are all indexed. The Smithsonian has a project. They're getting the rest of them indexed. But right now, Virginia, you know, we have to thank those volunteers back in 2008 and stuff that were there that indexed those records. And that means, remember that right side of that list, that's what you're going to see. So it's amazing. So that'll help. And thank you for putting those in. Karen Kay put the website, the Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau, and then it's the Black Pearls of Genealogy site. And just go in, look on the right, drop down, everything you ever wanted to know about getting in the Bureau. They're both
Awesome.
real easy to use.
Okay. So we're right at time.
Huh?
And so what'll happen is after this call, this call was recorded, we'll be sending out a survey in addition to the recording of the call and the password for you to get in. Additionally, you'll find Dr. Murphy's contact information in the summation of the session itself. So that way, if you have any additional questions, you can always feel free to reach out to Dr. Murphy. You can also reach out to the Montpelier Descendants Committee as well, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that we may be able to on our own or in collaboration with Dr. Murphy. So thank you everyone for your participation in today. Special shout out to Dr. Murphy. Appreciate your wealth of knowledge, and
Thank
you
you.
already know what you've done for me and my family. So I want to extend you, great appreciation that way as well. Mr. Craig, is that a hand up or just a clap? Guess it was a clap. All right. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week and stay warm.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, folks.